Introduction. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to glide through life effortlessly, securing promotions, closing impossible deals, charming entire rooms, and somehow always getting their way, while others, perhaps just as intelligent or qualified, struggle to be heard? It's not luck. It's not charisma. It's persuasion. Persuasion is the invisible force that shapes decisions, shifts opinions, and drives action. It's the difference between being listened to and being ignored, between influence and irrelevance, between dreaming of success and actually achieving it. In a world overflowing with ideas, products, and personalities vying for attention, your ability to persuade has never been more critical. Whether you're selling a product, negotiating a raise, leading a team, pitching a startup, parenting a teenager, or simply trying to make new friends, persuasion is the skill that empowers you to shape outcomes instead of passively accepting them. Why most people fail at persuasion? Most people think persuasion is about talking others into something. It's not. It's about listening. It's about knowing what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. People fail at persuasion for one of three reasons. They don't understand how others think. They make assumptions, project their own motivations, or miss subtle emotional cues. They talk too much and listen too little. They try to push instead of pull. They focus on what they want instead of why the other person should care. This audiobook will teach you to flip that script. You'll learn to see the world through other people's eyes and speak directly to their unspoken desires. By the time you finish this audiobook, you'll have the mindset, knowledge, and tools to persuade anyone, anywhere, without pressure, without gimmicks, and without compromising your values. Let's get started. Chapter 1. The Psychology of Persuasion. Human behavior and decision-making are guided by a complex interplay of psychological, emotional, and social forces. Understanding these foundational principles is essential for mastering the art of persuasion, as it allows one to align messages with how people naturally think, feel, and act. At the core of human behavior lies the need for safety, connection, purpose, and consistency. These drives operate both consciously and unconsciously and form the psychological scaffolding on which persuasion strategies are built. One of the most fundamental principles is the desire for cognitive ease and consistency. People are inclined to favor information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs and values, a tendency known as confirmation bias. They also strive for internal harmony, avoiding the discomfort of cognitive dissonance, the psychological tension experienced when holding two conflicting thoughts or beliefs. Effective persuasion often works by either aligning with the audience's worldview or gently guiding them to resolve dissonance in a desired direction. This is why persuasive messages that mirror an individual's language, values, or identity often feel more trustworthy and compelling. Another crucial element is emotional resonance. Emotions play a central role in shaping human decisions, often more powerfully than logic or reason. People are more likely to be persuaded when they feel emotionally engaged, whether through empathy, fear, joy, pride, or even anger. Persuasion experts understand that tapping into the right emotional state creates a bridge between the communicator and the audience. This emotional attunement makes messages feel personal, urgent, and relevant. Humans evolved to make quick judgments based on emotional cues long before the development of rational analysis, and this evolutionary inheritance continues to influence modern decision-making. Social validation is another foundational principle that governs behavior. Humans are social creatures, highly attuned to the opinions, behaviors, and approval of others. This inclination towards social conformity arises from our need to belong and avoid rejection. The concept of social proof, the idea that people look to the behavior of others to guide their own actions, is particularly persuasive in ambiguous situations. Whether it's choosing a product, supporting a cause, or forming an opinion, people often defer to what others are doing or saying, especially those they perceive as similar to themselves or as authoritative. Closely related is the principle of authority. From early childhood, people are conditioned to respect and follow figures of authority. This isn't merely a social custom. It's a psychological shortcut that helps individuals navigate complexity by trusting perceived experts. In persuasive contexts, signals of authority, whether through credentials, confidence, status, or experience, significantly enhance credibility. However, authentic authority that is coupled with humility and empathy tends to be even more persuasive, as it lowers psychological defenses and invites open-mindedness. Scarcity also plays a powerful role in human decision-making. People are wired to assign greater value to things that are limited or fleeting, a bias rooted in the survival instincts of our ancestors who had to act quickly when resources were rare. When a product, opportunity, or piece of information is framed as exclusive, time-sensitive, or scarce, it triggers a fear of missing out, FOMO, prompting action that might otherwise be delayed. Persuasion that leverages scarcity must be used with integrity. However, as insincere scarcity can erode trust and damage credibility. Reciprocity is another cornerstone of human interaction. People naturally feel compelled to return favors, kindness, or generosity, whether consciously or unconsciously. This principle is deeply embedded in social norms and facilitates cooperation and mutual benefit. In persuasion, giving before asking, whether it's through valuable information, assistance, or genuine attention, tends to prime people to be more open, cooperative, and responsive. Reciprocity works best when it feels sincere and unforced, and when the gift given is perceived as meaningful by the recipient. Underlying all these principles is the human tendency toward identity preservation. People act in ways that are consistent with how they see themselves or how they want to be seen. This self-concept influences every decision, from the brands they support to the causes they champion. Effective persuasion often involves helping individuals see how a particular action, idea, or choice reinforces or enhances their identity. This is why storytelling is such a powerful persuasive tool. Stories allow people to see themselves as protagonists in a meaningful narrative, connecting their choices to larger values or purposes. Persuasion mastery is not about manipulation or trickery. It's about deep alignment, understanding the psychological architecture of your audience, and guiding their decisions with respect, empathy, and authenticity. It requires listening more than speaking, asking more than telling, and creating conditions where people feel safe, seen, and inspired to act. When these foundational principles are honored, persuasion becomes not just effective, but transformative. The 6 classic persuasion triggers. One of the most powerful persuasion triggers is reciprocity. Human beings are naturally inclined to return favors and kindnesses. This principle stems from the deeply ingrained social norm that obligates individuals to repay others for what they have received. In persuasive communication, offering something of value, whether it's time, information, a small gift, or an act of service, creates a psychological debt in the recipient. This sense of indebtedness often prompts a return gesture, such as compliance with a request, purchase of a product, or support for a cause. The reciprocity trigger works best when the initial act is perceived as genuine and tailored, rather than manipulative or transactional. Closely tied to human emotion and decision-making is the principle of scarcity. People tend to assign greater value to opportunities and items that are less available. The perception of scarcity ignites a sense of urgency and importance. Limited time offers, exclusive memberships, and products in short supply trigger an instinctive drive to act before the opportunity vanishes. Scarcity operates on the fear of missing out, FOMO, compelling individuals to make quicker decisions and commit more readily than they otherwise would. This trigger is particularly effective when the scarcity is real and verifiable, and when the object of desire is also seen as highly desirable or high status. Another key trigger is authority. People have a strong tendency to follow the lead of credible, knowledgeable experts. This deference to authority is deeply rooted in early social learning, where parents, teachers, and community leaders set standards for behavior. In persuasive efforts, the appearance of authority, through titles, uniforms, certifications, or confident demeanor, can lend immense weight to a message. However, it is not just the appearance, but the perceived legitimacy of that authority that determines its effectiveness. When an audience believes the communicator is trustworthy and competent, they are significantly more likely to be persuaded. The principle of consistency is based on the psychological need for internal harmony. Once individuals commit to something, especially publicly or in writing, they are far more likely to follow through. This is because people strive to appear and feel consistent in their behavior and attitudes. Persuaders leverage this principle by prompting small initial commitments that lead to larger actions, a process known as the foot-in-the-door technique. For instance, someone who agrees to sign a petition is more likely to donate or volunteer later. The strength of consistency lies in its ability to align current behavior with one's self-image, which makes changes feel authentic rather than coerced. Liking, another cornerstone of persuasion, is rooted in the simple fact that people are more easily influenced by those they like. Similarity, physical attractiveness, genuine compliments, shared interests, and positive associations all contribute to liking. When a persuader successfully builds rapport and connects on a personal level, resistance diminishes. Liking not only makes people more receptive to messages, but also enhances the sense of trust and relatability between the parties involved. In digital environments, this can be seen in the rise of influencer marketing, where individuals promote products and ideas through the trust they've established with their followers. Social proof plays a critical role in shaping perceptions and decisions. Especially in situations of uncertainty, people look to the behavior of others to determine their own. This principle underscores the persuasive power of testimonials, reviews, popularity indicators, and user-generated content. When we see others, particularly those who resemble us or whom we admire, engaging in a behavior or endorsing a product, we're more inclined to follow suit. Social proof is particularly potent in collective settings, such as crowds, communities, or online platforms, where trends and bandwagon effects can amplify influence dramatically. Mastery of persuasion, then, comes from more than just understanding these triggers in isolation. It involves integrating them with authenticity, timing, and context. Ethical persuasion aligns these principles with the values and interests of the audience, fostering genuine connection rather than manipulation. When used with respect and integrity, these classic triggers become powerful tools for inspiring action, changing minds, and cultivating influence in both personal and professional realms. Emotional versus logical appeals, and when to use both. In the art of persuasion, the interplay between emotional and logical appeals lies at the heart of what makes arguments compelling and effective. Both are powerful tools, each with distinct mechanisms and impacts on the human mind. Mastery of persuasion involves knowing not only how to employ each appeal, but when to prioritize one over the other, depending on the audience, context, and desired outcome. Logical appeals, often referred to as logos, rely on reason, evidence, and structured argumentation. They speak to the rational part of the human psyche. This type of appeal is grounded in facts, statistics, credible sources, and clear lines of reasoning. It seeks to convince the audience by showing that a conclusion follows logically from the evidence presented. Logical appeals are particularly effective in contexts where the audience values objectivity and critical thinking, such as academic debates, legal arguments, policy proposals, and technical or scientific presentations. In these scenarios, the audience expects claims to be backed by verifiable data and sound logic. A well-crafted logical argument can foster trust in the speaker's competence and integrity, especially when the information is complex or controversial. Emotional appeals, or pathos, on the other hand, aim to engage the audience's feelings. Rather than appealing to intellect, they speak to the heart, eliciting emotions such as empathy, fear, anger, joy, or hope. Emotional appeals are potent because they tap into the human tendency to make decisions based on feelings and values. Storytelling is one of the most effective vehicles for emotional persuasion. A narrative that evokes personal connection or moral resonance can bypass resistance and inspire action. Emotional appeals are especially useful in marketing, political campaigns, fundraising, and any persuasive effort that depends on inspiring urgency, solidarity, or loyalty. In these domains, a powerful story or image can carry more weight than a stack of data. Knowing when to use emotional versus logical appeals requires a nuanced understanding of the audience's mindset and the context of the persuasion effort. If the audience is skeptical, analytical, or focused on outcomes, logical reasoning will likely carry more weight. When the goal is to change entrenched opinions or prompt critical evaluation of a policy or idea, logic helps establish credibility and withstand scrutiny. However, if the audience is indifferent, distracted, or emotionally invested in the topic, an emotional appeal can cut through apathy or resistance in a way that logic alone cannot. A common mistake in persuasion is relying too heavily on one form of appeal to the exclusion of the other. Purely logical arguments, while technically sound, can come across as cold, detached, or unmotivating. They may satisfy intellectual curiosity, but fail to stir the audience into action. Conversely, overly emotional appeals without a foundation in logic can seem manipulative or shallow, risking credibility and long-term influence. The most persuasive communicators understand how to blend both, beginning with an emotional hook to gain attention and empathy, then reinforcing their point with solid evidence and reasoning. Cultural and individual differences also play a role in how appeals are received. Some cultures prioritize communal harmony and shared values, making emotional and ethical appeals more persuasive. Others may place a premium on data and objectivity, making logic more effective. Even within the same culture, an engineer and a poet may respond very differently to the same message. Understanding the values, expectations, and prior beliefs of the audience is essential to striking the right balance. In digital and multimedia communication, emotional appeals often dominate because of their immediacy and impact. Visuals, music, and personal testimonials can quickly create an emotional atmosphere that sways opinion. Yet, in written forms like white papers, academic journals, or policy briefs, logical appeals still reign supreme. The medium of persuasion also shapes the strategy. Identifying core human needs. Identifying core human needs is fundamental to mastering the art of persuasion. When we understand what drives people at their deepest levels, we can craft messages, strategies, and relationships that speak directly to those motivations. Among the most universally recognized and psychologically compelling needs are status, belonging, safety, and purpose. Each of these needs serves as a gateway to influence, shaping how individuals make decisions, form loyalties, and respond to messages. Status is the desire to be seen as valuable, respected, and important in the eyes of others. It's not simply about material wealth or professional titles. It's about how people perceive their position in a social hierarchy. Individuals who feel their status is threatened often resist change, not because they oppose the idea itself, but because it risks making them feel diminished. Conversely, when a message or product promises to elevate someone's perceived value, whether through recognition, exclusivity, or mastery, it can be remarkably persuasive. In marketing, status is evoked through luxury, scarcity, or association with aspirational groups. In leadership, it's conveyed by empowering others, offering praise, or creating opportunities for individuals to shine in front of their peers. Recognizing the importance of status allows a persuader to frame proposals in a way that enhances, rather than challenges, someone's social identity. Belonging speaks to the innate human craving for connection and acceptance. We are wired to seek inclusion in groups, whether familial, cultural, professional, or ideological. This need is deeply rooted in our evolutionary past, when social cohesion was essential for survival. People are far more likely to be influenced by messages that signal shared identity, mutual understanding, or tribal affiliation. When someone feels they are part of we, they become more receptive and loyal. Effective persuasion leverages this by building rapport, establishing common ground, and demonstrating empathy. Creating narratives that emphasize togetherness, or positioning an idea as something people like us do, taps directly into the need to belong. Ignoring this need often results in resistance, as people may feel alienated or misunderstood. Safety is another profound driver of human behavior. It encompasses not only physical security, but also emotional and psychological stability. We are naturally drawn to options that reduce uncertainty, minimize risk, and provide a sense of control. Persuasive messages are more effective when they soothe anxieties rather than stoke them, unless fear is being used intentionally to prompt protective action. Establishing credibility, offering proof, and highlighting trustworthiness all contribute to a sense of safety. In persuasive contexts, this often means providing guarantees, using testimonials, or demonstrating consistency and reliability. When people feel safe, they open up to influence. When they feel threatened, they close down, become defensive, or cling to the familiar. Purpose taps into the higher-order need to feel that one's life and actions matter. It is the bridge between identity and impact. People are deeply motivated by the idea that what they do contributes to something larger than themselves. Whether it's a cause, a mission, or a sense of legacy, purpose gives meaning to effort and sacrifice. In persuasion, appealing to purpose transforms ordinary messages into calls to action. It's why storytelling is so powerful. It frames behavior in terms of larger narratives that provide context and meaning. Great leaders, brands, and movements align themselves with purpose to inspire loyalty, commitment, and passion. When individuals see how their values align with a proposed course of action, they become not just participants but advocates. In mastering persuasion, recognizing these core needs is not about manipulation, it's about resonance. Effective persuasion does not coerce, it connects. It begins with deep listening, a genuine interest in understanding what people long for beneath the surface, and then tailoring communication to meet those needs in honest and empowering ways. The most successful persuaders are those who can align their message with the audience's internal landscape, not just their external behavior. By focusing on status, belonging, safety, and purpose, one taps into the timeless forces that shape human motivation and unlocks the potential to inspire true and lasting influence. How people make decisions, System 1 versus System 2 thinking. When exploring the intricacies of how people make decisions, especially within the broader context of persuasion mastery, it's essential to understand the dual process theory of human thinking. This theory, most notably articulated by psychologist Daniel Kahneman in his book Thinking, Fast and Slow, distinguishes between two systems of thought, System 1 and System 2. System 1 thinking operates automatically, quickly, and with little or no effort. It is intuitive, emotional, and often subconscious. This system is constantly active, scanning the environment, making snap judgments, and generating impressions and feelings that influence behavior. When someone sees an advertisement that instantly makes them feel happy or nostalgic, or when they trust a charismatic speaker without thoroughly evaluating the content of their message, System 1 is at work. It's the system that enables a person to dodge a ball coming at them unexpectedly, or to finish familiar phrases without thinking. It's fast, efficient, and prone to biases. System 2, in contrast, is slower, more deliberate, and more analytical. It kicks in when an individual faces complex problems, makes difficult decisions, or engages in careful reasoning. Activities such as evaluating the logic of an argument, solving a difficult math problem, or comparing pros and cons before making a purchase require the activation of System 2. This system is capable of overriding the automatic responses of System 1, but it requires energy, attention, and motivation. In the world of persuasion, mastery lies in knowing how to speak to both systems. Most decisions, especially those made quickly or under emotional influence, are driven by System 1. People are often persuaded not by logic or facts alone, but by stories, emotions, and the perceived credibility or likability of the communicator. Effective persuaders understand the shortcuts the brain uses, known as heuristics, such as the tendency to believe something that is repeated often, or to trust people who appear confident or similar to us. However, System 2 becomes essential in contexts where the stakes are higher or when the audience is particularly skeptical or analytical. In these situations, presenting sound logic, credible evidence, and clear reasoning becomes crucial. Persuasion in this domain requires more than charm or emotion. It demands coherence, structure, and often a step-by-step appeal to rationality. Interestingly, people often believe they are using System 2 when they are, in fact, relying on System 1. For example, someone might say they bought a product because they compared multiple options and evaluated all the features. But in truth, Their final decision may have been swayed by branding, visual appeal, or a catchy slogan, elements that trigger System 1 responses. The interplay between these two systems is where true persuasion mastery lies. Skilled communicators know how to evoke intuitive agreement and emotional engagement through System 1, while simultaneously supporting their messages with rational structure to satisfy System 2. For instance, a political campaign might use emotionally charged imagery and slogans to create immediate connection, System 1, but also provide detailed policy plans or endorsements to reassure more critical thinkers, System 2. Understanding the dominance of System 1 in everyday decision-making also explains why cognitive biases are so prevalent and powerful. Confirmation bias, the halo effect, anchoring, and availability heuristics are all products of this fast, intuitive system. By recognizing these biases, persuaders can either avoid falling prey to them or ethically harness them to make their messages more resonant. Decision-making is rarely a pure function of either system in isolation. Instead, the two systems interact continuously, with System 1 often setting the stage and System 2 occasionally stepping in to modify or override. Mastery of persuasion involves creating messages and experiences that appeal to this dynamic interplay, making the intuitive feel right while also standing up to scrutiny when the rational mind is activated. By appreciating how these systems work, persuaders gain a deeper, more nuanced understanding of human behavior. They learn to craft messages that not only inform but influence, not only convince but move people to act, bridging the gap between logic and emotion, reason and reflex. Chapter 2. Building instant trust and credibility. Trust is the bedrock upon which the entire edifice of persuasion stands. Without it, the most eloquent arguments, compelling stories, and powerful appeals fall flat or even backfire. When someone is attempting to persuade another, whether in business, politics, personal relationships, or marketing, the extent to which they are trusted often determines whether their message is accepted or rejected. This dynamic is deeply rooted in human psychology and social behavior, touching upon ethics, credibility, and emotional intelligence. Persuasion involves influencing beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors. But influence is a delicate process, and it becomes effective only when the person being influenced feels safe, understood, and respected. Trust functions as the emotional bridge between the persuader and the audience. It allows messages to be received with openness rather than suspicion. In the absence of trust, people tend to erect psychological barriers, scrutinizing every word and gesture for signs of manipulation or deceit. Even when a message is logical and evidence-based, it will often be dismissed if the source lacks credibility or is perceived as insincere. Credibility, a key dimension of trust, plays an especially crucial role in persuasion. Credibility is often judged by two primary components: expertise and character. A persuader who demonstrates deep knowledge and competence in a subject area is more likely to be taken seriously. However, expertise alone is insufficient. People also need to believe that the persuader has good intentions, that they are honest, transparent, and aligned with the audience's interests. This intersection of competence and benevolence is what gives rise to genuine trust. Trust is also built through consistency over time. A persuader who demonstrates reliability by keeping promises, following through on commitments, and showing predictable behavior gradually earns the confidence of others. This kind of trust doesn't emerge overnight. It develops through repeated interactions in which the persuader proves themselves to be a person of integrity. In persuasive contexts, especially those that involve high stakes or long-term influence, this kind of trust becomes invaluable. Emotional connection is another critical pathway to building trust. When persuaders show empathy, listen actively, and respond to the concerns and values of their audience, they create a sense of rapport and psychological safety. People are more likely to trust those who seem to understand them and care about their well-being. This is why storytelling and shared experiences are so potent in persuasion. They humanize the persuader, making their message more relatable and emotionally resonant. In digital communication and mass media, where face-to-face cues are limited, building trust becomes more challenging, yet even more essential. Online reviews, social proof, brand consistency, and transparency in messaging all serve as trust signals. For instance, a company trying to persuade customers to adopt a new product must first overcome the skepticism that often surrounds marketing claims. Trust is earned here not just through product quality, but through open communication, responsive customer service, and a track record of delivering value. Manipulation, which is persuasion without regard for the other person's welfare, often leads to short-term gains but long-term losses in trust. Once trust is broken, it can be incredibly difficult to restore. This is why ethical persuasion, grounded in honesty, respect, and mutual benefit, is far more sustainable and effective. Master persuaders understand that their influence depends not just on what they say or how they say it, but on who they are perceived to be. First impressions, mastering body language, tone, and appearance. First impressions wield extraordinary power in the realm of persuasion mastery, shaping how others perceive and respond to us within mere seconds of interaction. When it comes to crafting these pivotal moments, mastering body language, tone, and appearance becomes not just beneficial but essential. These three elements act as the silent architects of influence, often speaking louder and more convincingly than words ever could. Body language serves as the unspoken narrative that runs alongside our verbal communication. It conveys confidence, openness, and credibility, or conversely, insecurity, disinterest, and doubt. The way we carry ourselves, from the alignment of our posture to the subtle gestures we make, informs others about our emotional state and intentions before we even utter a single sentence. A relaxed, upright posture with shoulders back signals assurance and readiness, while slouching or closed-off positions can inadvertently project insecurity or defensiveness. Eye contact, often regarded as a cornerstone of effective communication, further cements trust and engagement. Sustained yet natural eye contact invites connection and shows attentiveness, whereas fleeting or absent eye contact can create distance or suspicion. Additionally, facial expressions, from genuine smiles to furrowed brows, add layers of emotional context, enhancing the authenticity and warmth that are vital in persuasion. Tone of voice operates as the auditory counterpart to body language, influencing the emotional texture of the interaction. It carries nuances of enthusiasm, sincerity, authority, or empathy, shaping how messages are received beyond the literal meaning of words. A confident tone is steady and clear, projecting certainty without arrogance. Variations in pitch and pace can emphasize key points and keep listeners engaged, while monotone delivery risks disengagement. Pauses, too, can be strategic, allowing important ideas to resonate or providing moments for reflection, thus reinforcing persuasive power. The tone also reflects emotional intelligence, revealing how well a speaker manages their own feelings and responds to those of others, which significantly affects relational dynamics. Appearance, often the most immediate aspect others notice, functions as a visual shorthand for professionalism, credibility, and respect. This does not imply superficiality, but acknowledges that visual cues influence initial judgments and can either open or close doors in interpersonal and professional contexts. Dressing appropriately for the setting, grooming meticulously, and maintaining personal hygiene all contribute to a polished image that commands attention and respect. Beyond mere clothing choices, the way colors, styles, and accessories are utilized can subtly communicate personality traits or align with the expectations of a particular audience. When appearance is thoughtfully managed, it creates a harmonious alignment with verbal and nonverbal signals, reinforcing the overall persuasive message. The interplay between body language, tone, and appearance is where mastery truly emerges. It is not enough to excel in one area alone. Genuine persuasion comes from their seamless integration. For example, a confident stance paired with a warm tone and professional attire creates a compelling package that naturally draws people in. In contrast, mismatched cues, such as enthusiastic words paired with nervous gestures or an untidy appearance, can generate cognitive dissonance and reduce trust. Practicing self-awareness is crucial, as it allows individuals to monitor and adjust these elements in real time, ensuring they convey the intended message consistently and convincingly. Mastering first impressions through body language, tone, and appearance empowers individuals to establish rapport quickly, build credibility, and open pathways for influence. It transforms fleeting moments into lasting connections, laying the groundwork for successful persuasion across diverse situations, whether in leadership, sales, negotiations, or everyday social interactions. The silent language of the body, the music of the voice, and the story told by appearance together compose a powerful symphony of influence that, when skillfully conducted, can move minds and hearts alike. Social proof and authority signals. Social proof and authority signals stand as two of the most influential psychological levers in the domain of persuasion mastery. Understanding and harnessing these concepts allows individuals, marketers, leaders, and communicators to craft messages and environments that significantly increase compliance, trust, and influence. Social proof refers to the psychological phenomenon where people look to the behavior and attitudes of others to determine what is correct or acceptable in a given situation. It arises from the basic human need for social acceptance and the assumption that if many others are doing something, it must be the right course of action. This effect is especially potent in ambiguous or uncertain scenarios where individuals lack sufficient information to make confident decisions on their own. For example, when deciding whether to try a new restaurant, potential customers are often swayed by positive online reviews or seeing a busy dining room filled with patrons. The underlying principle is that observing others' choices serves as a shortcut for our own decision-making, reducing cognitive effort while simultaneously lowering the risk of making a poor decision. Social proof manifests in various forms. The simplest is direct observation of others' behavior. Seeing a crowd, for instance, naturally draws more people to join, as if the crowd itself validates the value of the event or place. Testimonials and reviews, both in traditional media and on digital platforms, act as extensions of social proof by aggregating collective opinions. Celebrity endorsements also function as social proof, as fans tend to emulate the choices and preferences of admired figures. Online, metrics such as likes, shares, follower counts, and user-generated content all provide visible indicators of popularity and acceptance, further reinforcing social proof's impact. The power of social proof is rooted in the concept of normative influence, where individuals conform to group norms to be accepted or avoid social ridicule. It also taps into informational influence, where people assume the group possesses greater knowledge. This dual nature makes social proof a robust persuasion technique, capable of shaping behaviors from consumer purchases to social movements. Authority signals complement social proof by leveraging perceived expertise, credibility, or status to influence decisions. When an individual or entity is viewed as an authority, their opinions and directives carry disproportionate weight. Authority signals come from various sources, such as professional titles, credentials, uniforms, official endorsements, awards, and even confident presentation. Humans are wired to defer to authority figures as a survival mechanism, associating expertise and power with safety and correctness. In persuasion mastery, the appearance and perception of authority can significantly alter how a message is received. For instance, a doctor's recommendation often persuades more effectively than the same advice coming from a layperson, not necessarily because the information is different, but because of the perceived credibility attached to the doctor's role. Similarly, brands use certifications, expert testimonials, and scientific data to project authority, thereby building trust and reducing resistance. It is crucial to recognize that authority signals rely heavily on trustworthiness and authenticity. If an authority figure is perceived as lacking integrity or competence, their influence can backfire, leading to skepticism or outright rejection. Hence, effective persuasion through authority requires maintaining consistent expertise, demonstrating genuine knowledge, and aligning actions with stated values. Together, social proof and authority signals create a powerful synergy. While social proof assures people that a choice is popular and socially acceptable, authority adds the dimension of expert validation. When these two forces are combined, such as a well-known expert endorsing a widely praised product, the persuasive impact multiplies. This interplay explains why testimonials from professionals paired with user reviews are so prevalent in advertising, and why endorsements from credible institutions accompanied by mass adoption generate widespread acceptance. Mastering persuasion involves not only understanding these concepts, but also deploying them ethically and strategically. Overuse or manipulation of social proof and authority can erode trust and credibility, ultimately diminishing influence. When used wisely, they facilitate decision-making, reduce uncertainty, and inspire confidence, paving the way for meaningful and lasting persuasion. Authenticity and likability. Crafting your persona. Authenticity and likability are two of the most powerful pillars in the art of persuasion, deeply intertwined with the way we craft and present our personal personas. When people interact with us, whether in personal conversations, professional settings, or public speaking, they're constantly assessing not only what we say, but who we are. This underlying judgment shapes their receptiveness to our ideas and ultimately determines the success of our influence. Authenticity is about being real and genuine, presenting yourself in a way that is true to your values, beliefs, and experiences. It's not about perfect polish or a rehearsed script, but rather about aligning your external expressions with your internal truth. When authenticity shines through, it creates trust. People instinctively recognize when someone is sincere, and this recognition breaks down barriers of skepticism and resistance. Authenticity evokes a sense of reliability. It tells others, what you see is what you get. This honesty is magnetic because humans naturally crave connection with others who are transparent and trustworthy. When your words, tone, and body language harmonize with your genuine self, the emotional resonance you create lays a strong foundation for persuasive communication. Likability, on the other hand, taps into the social dynamics of human interaction. It is often the emotional glue that connects us to others. We are more inclined to listen, be influenced by, and even go out of our way for people we like. Likability doesn't mean trying to please everyone or losing your individuality. Instead, it involves cultivating warmth, empathy, and approachability. Simple things like smiling, maintaining eye contact, using open and inviting body language, and genuinely showing interest in others contribute to a likable persona. Importantly, likability also stems from being relatable, sharing personal stories, showing vulnerability, and demonstrating that you understand others' experiences. This relatability makes people feel seen and heard, which softens their defenses and opens doors for deeper influence. Crafting your persona with these elements in mind requires intentional self-awareness and practice. It starts with understanding who you truly are, your strengths, your quirks, your passions, and your boundaries. Then, the challenge lies in expressing this self authentically while also tuning into the emotional and psychological needs of your audience. This balance is delicate but crucial. Too much focus on being likable without authenticity can come across as manipulative or superficial, eroding trust. Conversely, extreme authenticity without regard for social cues may alienate or confuse others. The most persuasive personas weave authenticity and likability together seamlessly, creating a character that is not only believable but also compelling. In mastering persuasion through persona crafting, consider the story you tell about yourself. Stories are potent tools of influence because they humanize abstract ideas and make connections memorable. When you tell stories that reflect your authentic journey, struggles, and victories, you build credibility. People are drawn to narratives that reveal your humanity, making you more approachable and likable. Additionally, how you communicate those stories, the tone, timing, and emotional delivery, shapes your likability and reinforces authenticity. Another subtle but essential dimension of crafting your persona is congruence. This means ensuring consistency across your verbal and nonverbal communication. If your words say one thing, but your body language or facial expressions convey another, you create dissonance, which undermines your influence. People are finely attuned to these mismatches, often subconsciously detecting when someone is not being genuine. Therefore, the pursuit of authenticity and likability extends beyond content into delivery and presence. Authenticity and likability are not just traits you either have or don't have. They are skills that can be nurtured. Developing emotional intelligence, practicing active listening, reflecting on feedback, and being open to growth all contribute to refining your persona. When mastered, these qualities don't just help you persuade. They inspire loyalty, foster meaningful relationships, and create lasting impact. Persuasion mastery, at its core, is about connecting deeply with others. And nothing connects more powerfully than a persona that is both authentically you and warmly inviting. Mirroring, pacing, and leading techniques. Mirroring, pacing, and leading are powerful techniques often used in the realm of persuasion mastery, deeply rooted in psychology and communication. These methods enable a communicator to build rapport, create trust, and gently guide someone toward a desired outcome, often without overt resistance or awareness from the other party. Understanding and applying these strategies can elevate interpersonal influence, whether in sales, negotiations, therapy, leadership, or everyday social interactions. Mirroring involves subtly reflecting another person's behavior, speech patterns, body language, or emotions. This unconscious mimicry is a fundamental human trait. People tend to feel more comfortable and connected with those who appear similar to themselves. By aligning one's gestures, posture, tone, or even breathing rhythm with that of the person you're interacting with, you can create a sense of familiarity and harmony. For example, if someone leans forward while talking, mirroring that lean can foster a feeling of closeness and empathy. Importantly, mirroring should be done gently and naturally to avoid seeming mechanical or insincere. When done right, it works beneath conscious awareness to build subconscious trust. This technique is especially useful in establishing rapport quickly, helping the other person feel understood and valued. Pacing, on the other hand, is the process of matching the current state or behavior of the person you want to influence. It means acknowledging and validating their reality before attempting to shift it. This could be matching their emotional state, acknowledging their beliefs, or agreeing with their expressed concerns. By pacing the other person's experience, whether it's their mood, pace of speech, or thought patterns, you create a non-threatening environment where they feel safe and heard. This alignment is essential because people naturally resist change or suggestions that come too abruptly or feel imposed. Pacing helps to lower this resistance by first stepping into their current frame of reference, which opens the door for deeper connection and influence. It is often said that people need to feel seen before they can be led, and pacing fulfills this need by showing empathy and validation. Leading is the subtle transition from pacing into guiding the other person toward a new perspective, decision, or behavior. Once rapport has been established through mirroring and pacing, leading gently shifts the interaction by introducing new ideas, suggestions, or actions. This process respects the other person's autonomy and readiness to change, ensuring the influence feels collaborative rather than coercive. For instance, after matching someone's emotional tone and rhythm, you might gradually slow down your speech or soften your posture to lead them into a calmer state. Or, after agreeing with their concerns, you might begin to propose solutions or alternative viewpoints. Leading is about taking the subtle initiative once trust is established, influencing without force, and helping the other person move naturally toward your intended outcome. Together, these techniques form a flow. Mirroring and pacing build connection and trust, creating fertile ground for leading. When done skillfully, this triad enables a persuasive dynamic that respects the other person's experience while facilitating desired changes. Mirroring reassures by reflecting the other's world. Pacing validates by synchronizing with it, and leading gently expands or redirects it. Mastering these approaches requires keen observation, emotional intelligence, and adaptability. It's not just about copying behaviors, but about genuinely tuning into the other person's internal experience and meeting them there. This attunement fosters a deeper sense of rapport that enhances the effectiveness of persuasion. Moreover, ethical use of these techniques is paramount. When used sincerely and responsibly, they create win-win interactions rather than manipulation. Mirroring, pacing, and leading are foundational pillars in the art of persuasion mastery. They harness natural human tendencies toward connection and understanding to facilitate influence that feels natural, respectful, and compelling. Practicing these techniques can transform everyday conversations into opportunities for meaningful influence, enabling you to inspire, motivate, and guide others with subtlety and grace. Chapter 3: The Language of Influence. Persuasion mastery is an art that hinges not just on what you say, but how you structure your conversations to guide others toward your point of view. Structuring persuasive conversations involves a delicate balance between understanding your audience, presenting your ideas clearly, and responding to objections thoughtfully. This process is much like a carefully choreographed dance, where every step is intentional and aimed at creating a mutual understanding and alignment. To begin with, any persuasive conversation must start with building rapport and trust. Establishing a connection sets the tone and opens the door for influence. When people feel understood and respected, they naturally lower their defenses. This phase often involves active listening, demonstrating empathy, and reflecting the other person's concerns or values. It is less about jumping directly into your argument, and more about creating an environment where the other party feels heard and valued. Once rapport is established, the next phase revolves around framing the issue or idea in a way that resonates with the listener. Persuasion is never one size fits all. It requires tailoring the message to match the values, needs, and interests of the audience. This means speaking their language and emphasizing benefits that matter most to them. Rather than focusing on features or facts alone, highlighting how the idea solves a problem or improves their situation can create emotional engagement and personal relevance. As the conversation deepens, presenting your case logically and clearly becomes essential. Here, storytelling can be incredibly effective. Instead of bombarding with dry data, weaving your points into compelling narratives helps people visualize the outcomes and internalize the message. Stories humanize abstract concepts and make your argument memorable. The flow of information should move smoothly from identifying the problem, illustrating consequences, offering a solution, and explaining why your approach is the best path forward. Throughout the discussion, it's important to invite participation and gently test the listener's reactions. This might involve asking open-ended questions or inviting their perspective on the issue. Doing so not only provides you with valuable insight into any reservations they might hold, but also increases their engagement and investment in the conversation. A persuasive dialogue is not a monologue. It's a dynamic exchange where the other person feels like a collaborator rather than a target. Addressing objections skillfully is another crucial aspect of structuring persuasive conversations. When concerns arise, instead of dismissing them, acknowledge and validate these feelings. This approach reduces resistance and shows respect for the other's viewpoint. Following validation, you can gently reframe the objection or provide additional information that alleviates doubts. Being prepared with evidence or alternative perspectives, yet delivering them in a non-confrontational manner, strengthens your credibility and encourages open-mindedness. As the conversation approaches its conclusion, summarizing key points helps reinforce the core message and solidify understanding. This recap should feel natural and not like a checklist, but rather a shared reflection of the progress made together. At this stage, you can also introduce a call to action, clearly and confidently guiding the listener toward the next step. This might be a decision, an agreement to try something new, or simply a commitment to reconsider an idea. Leaving the door open for future conversations is a subtle but powerful strategy. Persuasion is often a process rather than a single event. By expressing openness to continue the dialogue, you maintain the relationship and keep the possibility of influence alive. It shows humility and patience, traits that build long-term trust and credibility. Power words that trigger action and compliance. Power words are some of the most potent tools in the art of persuasion. They tap directly into human emotions, subconscious desires, and instincts, compelling people to act or comply without resistance. These words carry more than just literal meaning. They are carefully crafted or chosen to ignite a psychological response that bypasses rational analysis and encourages immediate engagement. Power words evoke feelings of urgency, exclusivity, safety, or curiosity. For instance, words like now, immediately, or urgent instill a sense of time sensitivity, motivating people to act quickly before an opportunity slips away. This urgency can dramatically shift decision-making from procrastination to prompt action. Similarly, terms such as exclusive, secret, or limited create an allure of rarity, making an offer or message feel special and accessible only to a select group. This perceived scarcity enhances the value of what is being offered, prompting compliance driven by the fear of missing out. Emotional triggers are another cornerstone of power words. Humans are inherently emotional beings, and persuasive language that taps into their hopes, fears, aspirations, or pain points is incredibly effective. Words like guaranteed, safe, and proven address the need for security and trust, lowering the psychological barriers that might prevent someone from saying yes. On the flip side, words such as risk, danger, or loss can activate protective instincts, urging immediate action to avoid negative consequences. The ability to balance reassurance with a subtle threat or consequence is a hallmark of persuasion mastery. Power words also work through the creation of vivid mental images and sensory experiences. Words like imagine, discover, unleash, or transform invite people to visualize the benefits or outcomes of compliance. This mental simulation makes the prospect more tangible and emotionally charged, increasing the likelihood of engagement. When people picture themselves enjoying success, relief, or pleasure, their motivation to act intensifies. The subtle art of influence often relies on power words that suggest ease, simplicity, or effortlessness. Terms such as easy, simple, effortless, and quick appeal to our desire for convenience and immediate gratification. These words reduce the perceived difficulty of taking action, making compliance feel like the path of least resistance rather than a daunting challenge. In a world filled with distractions and choices, presenting something as straightforward and accessible becomes a powerful persuasion strategy. Another dimension of power words is their ability to evoke authority and credibility. Words like expert, proven, scientific, and certified lend weight and legitimacy to a message, reassuring the audience that they are dealing with a trustworthy source. This association with authority can diminish skepticism and increase compliance, as people naturally tend to follow recognized experts or validated information. Power words can foster a sense of community and belonging, which is a fundamental human need. Words like together, community, join, or belong encourage compliance by appealing to the social instincts of inclusion and acceptance. When people feel part of a group or movement, they are more likely to align their behavior with that group's expectations. Persuasion mastery also exploits power words that trigger curiosity and intrigue. Words such as secret, unlock, hidden, or mystery pique interest by promising knowledge or benefits that are not immediately accessible. This drives people to take the next step to satisfy their curiosity, often leading to deeper engagement and eventual compliance. Power words function as psychological shortcuts. Instead of relying on lengthy explanations or logical arguments, they evoke immediate, instinctive responses that pave the way for influence and action. Skilled communicators weave these words seamlessly into their language, amplifying their impact while maintaining authenticity. The mastery of persuasion, therefore, is not just about what you say, but how you say it. Choosing words that resonate, compel, and move people to respond favorably. By understanding the emotional and cognitive triggers embedded in language, one can elevate their ability to persuade, inspire, and lead. Power words are the catalysts that transform ordinary communication into compelling calls to action, unlocking the doors to influence and compliance with subtlety and strength. The science of framing and reframing objections. The science of framing and reframing objections is a foundational pillar in the art and science of persuasion mastery. At its core, framing refers to the way information is presented and structured in communication, influencing how an audience perceives and interprets a message. Reframing, on the other hand, involves shifting the perspective or context of a particular objection or argument to change its meaning or emotional impact, often turning resistance into acceptance. Understanding framing starts with the recognition that human beings do not process information in a vacuum. Our brains are wired to respond to context, emotional cues, and underlying narratives. When someone raises an objection, they are expressing not just a logical concern, but also an emotional or psychological barrier that must be navigated. Effective persuaders understand that how they frame a message before, during, and after the objection can significantly alter the outcome of the interaction. In practical terms, framing can involve highlighting certain aspects of a proposal while downplaying others, thereby guiding the listener's focus to what is most favorable. For example, presenting a product as a means to avoid loss rather than to achieve gain can trigger different emotional responses based on the loss aversion principle in behavioral economics. Similarly, the choice of words, tone, and even body language form part of the framing process, subtly steering the listener's cognitive and emotional interpretation. Reframing objections takes this a step further by actively transforming the perceived problem into an opportunity or a new way of understanding the issue. When someone objects by saying something is too expensive, a master persuader might reframe this objection by shifting the focus from cost to value, emphasizing long-term benefits, return on investment, or intangible gains that outweigh immediate price concerns. This cognitive shift is powerful because it invites the objector to reconsider the objection from a different angle, often reducing emotional resistance and opening the door for agreement. The science behind this lies deeply rooted in cognitive psychology and neuroscience. The brain's amygdala, which processes emotions like fear and anxiety, can trigger defensive reactions when objections are perceived as threats. By reframing, the persuader essentially calms the amygdala's response by creating a new narrative that aligns more closely with the objector's values and beliefs. This shift allows the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational decision-making, to re-engage, increasing the likelihood of a more reasoned and less reactive response. Reframing is not about dismissing or invalidating objections, but rather about acknowledging them respectfully and then guiding the conversation toward a constructive resolution. It requires empathy, active listening, and a deep understanding of the other person's underlying motivations and fears. By validating the objection and then reframing it, the persuader builds trust and rapport, creating a collaborative rather than confrontational dynamic. The process also involves anticipation and preparation. Skilled persuaders often anticipate common objections and develop reframes in advance, allowing them to respond fluidly and confidently. They recognize that the way objections are met can either escalate resistance or transform it into curiosity and openness. In this sense, reframing becomes a strategic tool in the persuasion toolkit, turning obstacles into stepping stones. Another critical element is the concept of narrative framing, where the objection is woven into a larger story that resonates emotionally and intellectually. Humans are naturally drawn to stories, and reframing objections within a compelling narrative helps the listener connect the dots in a meaningful way. Instead of isolated facts or rebuttals, the objection becomes part of a coherent and persuasive argument that speaks to values, aspirations, or shared experiences. The mastery of framing and reframing objections is about shaping perception and guiding mental models. It is less about winning an argument and more about co-creating understanding. The persuader acts as a cognitive architect, designing pathways that lead the listener from doubt to clarity, from resistance to acceptance. Storytelling as a persuasion tool. Storytelling as a persuasion tool holds a profound and timeless power in influencing human thought, emotion, and behavior. Storytelling is a fundamental mode of communication that predates written language, deeply embedded in our evolutionary history. This ancient tradition shapes the way people understand the world, connect with others, and make decisions. When harnessed skillfully, storytelling becomes much more than a way to entertain. It transforms into a compelling vehicle for persuasion. One of the reasons storytelling is so effective in persuasion is because it taps into the emotional brain, which is often the true driver behind decision-making. People do not respond solely to logic or data. They respond to feelings. A well-crafted story activates empathy and imagination, allowing the listener or reader to experience the narrative firsthand. This immersive engagement helps to break down skepticism and resistance, making the audience more open to new ideas or calls to action. Unlike dry facts or abstract arguments, stories provide a context that is relatable and memorable, embedding the message deeply within the listener's mind. Storytelling works by creating a coherent narrative structure that mirrors how humans naturally process information. Our brains are wired to recognize patterns and make sense of sequences of events. A story that follows a clear arc, introducing a relatable character, presenting a conflict or challenge, and resolving with a meaningful outcome, guides the audience through a journey. This journey often reflects the psychological journey the persuader wants the audience to take, subtly leading them to the desired conclusion without triggering defensive reactions. Through this narrative framing, the persuasive message is integrated seamlessly rather than imposed. Another powerful element of storytelling as a persuasion tool lies in its ability to establish credibility and trust. When a storyteller shares personal experiences, anecdotes, or authentic narratives, it humanizes them and bridges the gap between speaker and audience. Trust is a crucial currency in persuasion. Without it, even the most logical arguments may fall flat. Stories allow the persuader to demonstrate empathy and shared values, making their message more believable and compelling. This connection fosters a sense of community and alignment, encouraging the audience to accept the point of view being presented. Stories have the unique capacity to simplify complexity and make abstract or unfamiliar concepts tangible. When dealing with intricate ideas or data, storytelling translates these into concrete scenarios and relatable characters. This translation makes the information accessible, breaking down barriers of understanding that can otherwise alienate or confuse an audience. People are more likely to embrace ideas that feel relevant to their lives, and storytelling provides that bridge. Through metaphor, allegory, or vivid imagery, stories enliven the message and give it practical significance. The cultural aspect of storytelling also enhances its persuasive impact. Stories often carry with them the cultural codes, myths, and archetypes that resonate deeply within a particular group or society. By drawing on these shared symbols and collective experiences, a storyteller can tap into a reservoir of meaning that strengthens the emotional and psychological grip of the message. This cultural resonance can mobilize communities, influence social norms, and shape collective behavior in ways that straightforward rhetoric cannot. Storytelling supports memory retention, which is crucial for long-term persuasion. People are more likely to remember a story than a list of facts or arguments. This means that the persuasive impact of storytelling can extend well beyond the immediate moment, influencing attitudes and decisions days, weeks, or even months later. When a story is vivid and emotionally charged, it creates mental hooks that anchor the persuasive message, making it easier for individuals to recall and share with others. This ripple effect amplifies the power of persuasion exponentially. The adaptability of storytelling also makes it a versatile tool across different contexts and audiences. Whether in marketing, politics, education, or personal influence, stories can be tailored to meet the unique needs, values, and preferences of diverse groups. This flexibility allows the persuader to align the narrative tone, style, and content to maximize relevance and impact. By tuning into the audience's worldview and aspirations, storytelling becomes a dialogue rather than a monologue, inviting participation and internalization of the message. In the digital age, the importance of storytelling and persuasion has only grown. With information overload and short attention spans, grabbing and holding attention is more challenging than ever. Stories cut through the noise by engaging both the heart and mind simultaneously. Visual storytelling, multimedia narratives, and interactive formats leverage the emotional pull of stories to create immersive experiences that foster stronger persuasion. Social media platforms and digital channels amplify the reach and speed with which stories can influence, allowing persuasive narratives to spread widely and rapidly. Storytelling as a persuasion tool is potent because it aligns with the fundamental ways humans think, feel, and communicate. It engages emotion, simplifies complexity, builds trust, connects culturally, enhances memory, and adapts to varied audiences and media. Mastery of storytelling is therefore central to persuasion mastery, offering a pathway to inspire, motivate, and ultimately change minds and behaviors in a deeply authentic and enduring way. Without storytelling, persuasion risks becoming abstract and mechanical. With it, persuasion becomes artful and transformational. Asking irresistible questions and leading with curiosity. Asking irresistible questions is about crafting inquiries that captivate attention and spark engagement. These are not the mundane, closed-ended questions that elicit simple yes or no answers. Instead, they are open-ended, thought-provoking, and emotionally resonant, inviting the other person to explore ideas, feelings, and perspectives. Such questions gently guide the conversation, revealing deeper layers of understanding and motivation, which are crucial in persuasion. They signal to the listener that their thoughts and experiences matter, fostering trust and openness. Leading with curiosity plays a complementary role. When curiosity is authentic and visible, it creates an atmosphere where the other person feels valued and respected. This genuine interest encourages them to lower their defenses and engage more fully. Curiosity is a powerful social lubricant. It dissolves barriers and transforms the dynamic from adversarial or transactional into collaborative and empathetic. People are naturally drawn to those who show sincere interest in their stories, challenges, and viewpoints because it fulfills a basic human need to be heard and understood. The synergy between asking irresistible questions and leading with curiosity lies in their ability to shift the focus from pushing an agenda to inviting exploration. Instead of imposing ideas, these techniques create a space where ideas can emerge organically, making the process feel less like persuasion and more like mutual discovery. This approach is particularly effective because it respects the autonomy of the other person, which paradoxically increases their willingness to consider new possibilities. Irresistible questions stimulate imagination and self-reflection. They encourage individuals to articulate their own reasons for change, often uncovering motivations they were only vaguely aware of. This internal discovery is far more compelling than external pressure because people are naturally more committed to decisions they perceive as their own. In this way, asking the right questions helps people to persuade themselves. Leading with curiosity also involves active listening, not just hearing words, but tuning into emotions, underlying beliefs, and subtle cues. This attentive presence allows the questioner to tailor follow-up questions with precision, deepening the dialogue and reinforcing rapport. It signals that the conversation is a two-way street, fostering mutual respect and openness. When people feel genuinely heard, they are more likely to be receptive, cooperative, and influenced. In practical terms, mastering this skill demands patience and humility. It requires setting aside the urge to dominate the conversation or rush toward a conclusion. Instead, one must cultivate an attitude of wonder and a willingness to learn from every interaction. This mindset shift alone can transform the way persuasion unfolds, making it a natural and ethical process rather than manipulation. Chapter 4. Strategic Persuasion Tactics. The yes ladder is a powerful technique in persuasion that hinges on the psychological tendency of people to seek consistency in their thoughts and actions. This concept involves guiding someone through a sequence of small, easily agreeable requests or statements, each designed to elicit a yes response. The idea is to build momentum by accumulating affirmative answers, which psychologically primes the person to continue saying yes to subsequent, often larger or more significant, requests. At its core, the yes ladder works by leveraging a natural human inclination. Once we agree to something, we feel compelled to maintain consistency with that initial choice. This is where the principle of commitment and consistency comes into play, a cornerstone of human psychology and one of the most studied concepts in social influence. The commitment consistency principle states that people have a deep-seated desire to appear consistent to themselves and to others. When individuals commit to an idea, behavior, or belief, even in a small way, they tend to act in ways that are consistent with that commitment. This is because inconsistency can create psychological discomfort, often referred to as cognitive dissonance. To avoid that discomfort, People often adjust their attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors to align with their past actions. In practical terms, when someone says yes to an initial small request, they have, in effect, committed to a particular mindset or course of action. This initial commitment makes it easier for them to say yes again to related or even larger requests because doing so aligns with their previous behavior and supports their self-image as a consistent person. The yes ladder technique capitalizes on this by starting with very low-stakes questions or requests that almost anyone would agree to, such as, "Do you want to be successful?" or "Would you like to save money?" thereby securing initial commitments. Each affirmative answer functions like a stepping stone, creating a psychological momentum that makes it progressively harder for the person to refuse the next request, as rejecting it would mean breaking the chain of consistency they have started. One key aspect of this approach is that it taps into the social and internal pressures to remain reliable and trustworthy. When someone has publicly or privately committed to something, changing course can feel like betraying their own word or values, which most people strive to avoid. This interplay between personal identity and social perception creates a strong motivational force behind continued compliance. The commitment consistency principle is so effective because it is automatic and largely unconscious. Most people are not even aware of how much their need to be consistent influences their decisions and behavior. Skilled persuaders understand this and design their communication strategies to guide people down a path of successive yes responses, carefully building the commitment in manageable increments. The broader implications of mastering the yes ladder and the commitment consistency principle are significant across many domains: sales, marketing, negotiation, leadership, and even everyday interpersonal interactions. When wielded ethically, these tools enable communicators to create genuine alignment and trust, helping others make decisions that benefit them while fostering cooperation and positive relationships. However, it's important to recognize that overusing or manipulating these principles without regard for the other person's autonomy can lead to resistance or ethical concerns. True persuasion mastery involves balancing the art of influence with respect and authenticity, anchoring contrast and scarcity in negotiations. In the realm of persuasion mastery, especially within negotiations, the concepts of anchoring, contrast, and scarcity hold profound significance. These psychological principles shape how individuals perceive value, make decisions, and ultimately influence outcomes. Understanding and skillfully applying these concepts can dramatically enhance a negotiator's effectiveness. Anchoring operates as a cognitive bias where the first piece of information presented, the anchor, heavily influences subsequent judgments and decisions. In negotiation, this often manifests when one party sets an initial offer or price. Even if that initial number is arbitrary or skewed, it serves as a reference point, subtly pulling the entire negotiation toward it. This is because human minds tend to rely disproportionately on the first information they receive when estimating values or deciding on compromises. The anchor sets a psychological baseline, making later offers seem more reasonable or extreme by comparison. Expert negotiators use anchoring deliberately, introducing a strong, well-chosen anchor to frame the discussion and gain a strategic advantage. By setting the tone early, they can influence the perceived fairness or acceptability of subsequent proposals, often nudging the other party to settle closer to their preferred outcome. Closely intertwined with anchoring is the principle of contrast, which is all about how perceptions shift based on comparisons. Humans rarely evaluate options in isolation. Instead, they constantly measure choices against one another. Contrast creates a context where the difference between two options seems larger or smaller, depending on their juxtaposition. In negotiations, this means that presenting one offer immediately after another can influence how each is perceived. For example, if a negotiator first offers an expensive package and then follows up with a more moderately priced option, the second offer appears more attractive, even if it would have seemed costly if presented alone. This comparative framing leverages the psychological tendency to assess value relationally rather than absolutely. Contrast can also be used to downplay undesirable aspects or amplify benefits by carefully sequencing information. By guiding the other party's frame of reference, negotiators manipulate the perception of value, leading to decisions that favor their objectives. Scarcity introduces another potent lever in persuasion during negotiations. Rooted in the idea that limited availability enhances perceived value, scarcity taps into a primal fear of missing out. When resources, opportunities, or time are scarce, people tend to assign them greater worth and urgency. Negotiators wield scarcity by highlighting constraints, whether it's limited quantities, exclusive deals, or looming deadlines, to create pressure and motivate quicker commitments. This tactic not only elevates the desirability of an offer, but also reduces the likelihood of procrastination or indecision. Scarcity triggers emotional responses tied to loss aversion. The prospect of losing out on a rare benefit often outweighs the appeal of potential gains. Skilled negotiators subtly convey scarcity without appearing desperate or manipulative, balancing urgency with trust. The key lies in making scarcity believable and relevant to the other party's interests, thereby reinforcing the value proposition and driving action. Together, anchoring, contrast, and scarcity form a triad of psychological influence that transforms negotiations from mere exchanges of facts and figures into strategic dialogues shaped by perception and emotion. Mastery of these principles allows negotiators not only to present their positions persuasively, but also to shape the mental landscape in which decisions are made. When anchoring sets the initial frame, contrast guides comparative evaluation, and scarcity injects urgency, the interplay of these forces creates a powerful momentum toward favorable agreements. Beyond their individual impact, their combined use reflects a deep understanding of human psychology, an essential foundation for anyone aiming to excel in the art of persuasion within negotiation settings. Timing and context, when not to persuade. Timing and context are crucial elements in the art of persuasion, often making the difference between success and failure. Understanding when not to persuade is just as important as knowing how to persuade effectively. Attempting to influence someone at the wrong moment or in an inappropriate setting can backfire, leading to resistance, mistrust, or damage to relationships. Persuasion requires a receptive audience, and timing plays a key role in creating that receptivity. If a person is stressed, overwhelmed, or distracted, their cognitive resources are occupied, and they are less likely to process your message thoughtfully. For example, trying to convince someone to change their opinion or behavior during a heated argument, or when they are emotionally charged, is often counterproductive. The emotional state may cause defensive reactions rather than open-mindedness. In such situations, persuasion attempts can escalate conflict rather than resolve it. Context also dictates when persuasion efforts may be inappropriate. Social, cultural, and situational factors shape how messages are received. For instance, trying to persuade someone in a public setting about a deeply personal or sensitive issue can put them on the spot, making them feel exposed or pressured. This can provoke discomfort or embarrassment, reducing their willingness to engage constructively. Conversely, a private, calm, and respectful context is more conducive to open dialogue and influence. The nature of the relationship between the persuader and the target is another contextual element that governs timing. When trust is lacking or the relationship is newly formed, attempts to persuade prematurely might be seen as intrusive or manipulative. Building rapport and credibility first lays a foundation for more successful persuasion later on. Trying to sway someone before earning their respect or understanding can cause skepticism or outright rejection. Sometimes, the content of the message itself demands careful timing. If the information contradicts someone's deeply held beliefs or values, presenting it too abruptly can trigger a defensive shutdown. Instead, it may be wiser to wait for moments when the person expresses curiosity or doubts, signaling a readiness to reconsider. This reflects the principle that persuasion is more effective when it aligns with the audience's internal state rather than confronting it head-on. External circumstances often influence whether persuasion should be attempted. If someone is dealing with a crisis, grieving a loss, or facing major life stressors, it may not be the right time to push for change. Empathy and patience in these moments show respect and understanding, which preserves the relationship and may open the door for persuasion later. Conversely, ignoring these cues and pressing the issue can be perceived as insensitive or exploitative. The complexity and scope of the persuasion goal should be considered. Trying to persuade someone to make a life-altering decision on the spot, without sufficient time for reflection, can be overwhelming and counterproductive. People often need time to process new information, weigh pros and cons, and discuss with others. Recognizing when to pause and allow this natural process is an important aspect of persuasion mastery. In professional environments, power dynamics and organizational culture also impact the appropriateness of persuasion attempts. Pressuring colleagues or subordinates in a hierarchical setting without regard for timing can damage morale and trust. Understanding when to present ideas, perhaps during brainstorming sessions or after preliminary discussions rather than in confrontational meetings, enhances the likelihood of positive outcomes. Mastering persuasion involves not only crafting compelling arguments, but also exercising judgment about when to hold back. The wise persuader listens attentively, reads nonverbal signals, and assesses the emotional and situational landscape before speaking. Recognizing the signs that someone is not ready or willing to be influenced protects the relationship and preserves the persuader's credibility. This strategic restraint often leads to more meaningful and lasting influence over time. How to become resilient in the face of rejection. Becoming resilient in the face of rejection is a crucial skill, especially when mastering persuasion, as rejection is often an inevitable part of influencing others. At its core, resilience is about developing a mindset that not only tolerates setbacks, but uses them as fuel for growth and improvement. The journey toward resilience begins with understanding that rejection is not a personal failure, but rather a natural response in any persuasive endeavor. When you embrace this perspective, you remove much of the emotional weight that rejection carries, allowing you to respond more calmly and rationally. One of the most powerful ways to build resilience is by reframing your interpretation of rejection. Instead of seeing it as a negative judgment on your worth or abilities, view it as valuable feedback. Each no offers insight into how your message, approach, or timing might be adjusted. This mindset encourages a curious and experimental attitude, where every setback becomes an opportunity to refine your skills and tactics. Moreover, recognizing that rejection is not universal. One person's refusal does not mean the entire world rejects you, helps prevent discouragement from spiraling into self-doubt. Developing emotional intelligence plays a pivotal role in building resilience. Learning to regulate your emotions when faced with rejection allows you to maintain composure, which is essential in persuasion. Instead of reacting impulsively or defensively, a resilient person processes emotions constructively. This could involve taking a moment to breathe, reflecting on what happened without harsh self-criticism, or discussing the experience with a trusted confidant who can offer perspective. Over time, these practices fortify your emotional muscles, making it easier to handle future rejections without losing confidence. Another important aspect is nurturing a strong sense of purpose and clarity about your goals. When you have a clear vision of why you are trying to persuade someone, whether it's to help them solve a problem, improve a situation, or achieve mutual benefit, rejection feels less like a personal blow and more like a temporary obstacle on the path to meaningful outcomes. This sense of purpose anchors you during tough moments, reminding you that setbacks are part of the process rather than a signal to give up. Building resilience also involves developing patience and persistence. Mastering persuasion is rarely a linear journey. It often involves repeated attempts, adjustments, and even rejections before success is achieved. Cultivating a mindset that values progress over perfection and understands that mastery requires time reduces frustration and burnout. Each rejection can be seen as a stepping stone, helping you inch closer to your goal rather than a definitive endpoint. Social support plays a crucial role in resilience as well. Surrounding yourself with mentors, peers, or friends who understand the challenges of persuasion can provide encouragement and constructive feedback. Sharing experiences of rejection normalizes them and helps you realize you're not alone. This community effect strengthens your resolve, offering emotional reinforcement and practical advice that can refine your approach. Resilience in the face of rejection is tied closely to self-compassion. Being kind to yourself when things don't go as planned fosters a growth mindset. Instead of harshly judging yourself, treat setbacks as learning experiences. Celebrate the courage it takes to put yourself out there and recognize the effort regardless of the immediate outcome. This self-compassion nurtures inner strength and reduces the fear of rejection, making it easier to try again.